Hello, it's Doug from Behind Closed Doors, and today I'm going to be looking at a video called Jordan Peterson, Do Women Want Men with Money? ? Before I get into the video, I think that money is a socially constructed concept, and so it's usually what money represents. And I think the ability to get money is probably more important than money itself, because money doesn't really exist. It's just a social contract that we have. But all fiat currencies eventually fail, and there's no intrinsic value in them. And in order to survive in the world, women need to pursue things that have intrinsic value. So I don't think that they do want men with money, the majority of them. It all depends on if a man with money is useful or not. Because life is all about survival and reproduction. So men look for reproduction value in women, and women look for survival value in men. So anything that is useful to survival value is what women tend to aim for. And money is just kind of an icon. It's kind of like a representation of something much deeper. So that's my perspective of it going into it. So let's get into the video.
If you look in the modern world, for example, and you try to predict number of available sexual partners for a given male, your best predictive measure of that is income. And the best
Well, I might be wrong then.
predictive measure of that is intelligence and conscientiousness. Women aren't after resources. That's wrong. They're after the factors that predict resources.
Yeah, but they are after resources. They're after that which produces resources.
What we did was we showed women a bunch of pictures, say several pictures of the same guy. So there was several guys. And each guy was in 4 conditions. The photo of each guy was in 4 conditions. Same photo, right? So one guy was poor and useless. One guy was rich and useless. One guy was rich and useful. And one guy was poor and useful. So the rich, useless guy had won a lottery, and it paid out like $4,000 a month for the rest of his life. So no matter how useless he was, he couldn't squander all of it. He had resources, right? The poor, useless guy, well, we don't even have to define that. Everybody understands that. The rich, useful guy, well, that's easy to understand. The poor, useful guy worked for a non-governmental agency. It was a charity, you know, in a charitable organization. And so he had high occupational status, but low income, and that wasn't likely to change. So then we asked women to rate these men on a bunch of different attributes, including personality, but also on dateability, basically, and also on probability of considering a long-term relationship with someone.
It'd be interesting to see how they did all this.
With someone like this. And wealth had no main effect. The only effect was usefulness. So the poor, useful guy and the rich, useful guy were attractive, more attractive to the women than the 2 useless.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, it goes into what I talk about on this channel about behaviour. Behaviour is the most important thing above all else. And when I watch videos like the Martin Gaines and all the other guys that come on there that saying women want a tall guy that's earning 6 figures and all this kind of, you know, you got to have muscles and all this bullshit. It's not necessarily that. It's based on behaviour, and you can change your behaviour in any given moment. And I think it's important for men to realise that if they can have self-respect, that will go a long way in attracting women.
The 2 useless guys, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And the women judged the useful guys as higher in openness and conscientiousness, which was pretty smart, because openness is basically intelligence and conscientiousness is hard work. And those are the best predictor of socioeconomic success. So
I don't like the term hard work. I prefer the term consistent work. Because hard work, a lot of people work hard, but they're not necessarily rewarded for it. So, whereas if you're dependable and competent and consistent, that's probably a better way of defining the type of work that you do.
And then, you know, there are certain physical characteristics, wide shoulders in men and narrow waist. And what's interesting is that, you know, if you take...
Right, okay, so he started off with like the money aspect, and that's more kind of like a provider framework. Now he's gone into the more kind of physical aspects, which are more of the lover framework, because they're on 2 different ends of the spectrum. Because one man, the provider, is good for providing useful resources for offspring, and the lover is good for providing useful resources that are good to make up genetically a healthy baby. So you've got the lover and the provider. That's how kind of women have it on the spectrum. And ideally, they'd like a guy that's both. The guy that they are attracted to, that they'd like to have babies with, is the same guy that they can bring up children with. But it's very difficult to get both in one man because they're at such opposite ends of the spectrum. Just because a man's useful in one area doesn't mean to say he's useful in the other area, and vice versa. And women are attracted to two different types of these men at different stages of their ovulation cycle.
And what's interesting is that, you know, if you take 60 people, let's say if you took 60 women and you asked them, you showed them a bunch of men and you asked them to rank them in terms of their attractiveness, there's going to be fairly consistent rankings. You know, I mean, we know what makes up attractive facial features for women and for men. It's easy to determine that. What you do is you take 60 faces and you average the features. So you don't get the average person, because the average person is more like a median. You get the averaged person. And the average person has perfectly symmetrical features that are nicely shaped and fairly big eyes, and they're very, you know, they're very nice looking. They're very attractive. And so that means that there's like a central human form, in a sense, that we find attractive. And we see this in other species. For example, there are butterflies who won't mate with another butterfly if it's like a 1/16 of an inch out of symmetry, because then it's not a butterfly of that type, you know, and that's how people think too, is the more you deviate.
There are so many videos on, you know, how to attract the opposite sex and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it, again, is put down to kind of like the physical appearance, and that's what this is kind of going into, like beauty and things that are aesthetically pleasing. But attraction isn't necessarily desire. You can be attracted to someone without desiring them. And I think if you get the desire right, the attraction doesn't matter as much. So the less time you spend on trying to attract somebody and the more time you spend on being a person of desire is probably a better investment of your time.
People think too is the more you deviate from the averaged person, the less canonically human you appear, and the less attractive that you appear. And so, you know, we're chasing this ideal in some sense that's an emergent property of the nature of our species. There is an ideal, like a Platonic ideal, lurking at the back of our minds against whom we compare everyone that we meet. There was a funny study done by the guy who established, it was one of the big dating sites, and he looked at...
Yeah, and I think that's probably where Kevin Samuels, you know, has taken off a lot, because women are comparing their ideal against everyone that they meet, and it doesn't match up. Because because the expectation of their ideal man isn't congruent with their current reality.
How women rated men, and they rated the 50th percentile man at the 15th percentile. So 85% of men were below average according to women's ratings.
Yeah, and if you look at a TV show like Take Me Out, we have here over in the UK, basically a line of women stand up, one man comes out and they judge him based on ridiculous criteria, and they all just exclude him by pressing the red button.
Only Jodie Marsh, who I think is so natural.
They could all like him 1 minute and be attracted to him and fancy him upon seeing him, but the more they find out about him, the more they become less attracted to him. So even though that sounds bad, 85% of men were below average according to women's ratings, it's even much more harsher than that. Because that's just based on looks, that's not even based on behaviour traits.
Many men are petrified by women. They won't approach them at all. They have no idea how to talk to them. They're just petrified into immobility. And that's...
For the most part, men don't approach women that they're attracted to because they're too afraid of the rejection that they'll get if they'll say no. And women aren't attracted to men that are attracted to them. So what happens is, say if there's a hot girl, if a man's attracted to her, he won't approach her. He'll much rather go with somebody else that he does spend a better chance with, because the fear of rejection won't feel as bad. So as a woman, if you're going through the world and a guy comes up to you, it's only because you're his second choice. So he wouldn't ordinarily choose you first. Now, because he's a coward. Now, this creates huge amounts of problems because men aren't really going after what they want. They're going after what they believe they can get. And so that leads to dissatisfaction in the relationship because men are putting themselves out and chasing for women that they're not overly attracted to. The other thing as well is, on the woman's part, if the guy is attracted to the woman and he does approach, and so he approaches her, he's going to be nervous because he fancies her, he's attracted to her, and he's afraid of rejection, and she'll feel that nervousness from him, and she'll view him based on her feelings. So therefore she'll reject him because he doesn't feel strong enough to be able to lead her, because like women have like emotions and they need like a strong guy that they can kind of lean on in order to feel safe and dependable and secure. And so if they're kind of waving around and they go to this guy and he's waving around, she'll reject him because it's not firm and secure. It's not strong. He's not a grounded man. So men don't approach women they're attracted to, and when they do, women reject them. So men don't get what they want out of a relationship. And that's a really big problem because now one half of the relationship isn't satisfied. And if you really do want to meet the woman of your dreams and have everything that you want, you need to develop more courage inside of yourself as a man. So that A, you do approach the woman so that you don't pussy out and settle for less. And B, when you do approach her, she's less likely to reject you because she can feel your strength.
Petrified into immobility. And that's way more common than you think. And so that breeds resentment like you wouldn't believe, you know. If you're chronically rejected by people, it's often because of your own insufficiencies. You know, whether that's cowardice or lack of social skills or whatever it is, it's like you can't just brush.
And that's how you end up with the incels, involuntary celibates. And that's where it can, if it goes down a more nihilistic road, can lead to school shootings. And young boys, young lads that aren't getting sex, that aren't getting love and affection and attention, are going to go around shooting people, and that's happened on several occasions. So this is what I'm saying, it's a really big problem in society because it leads to evil. We used to have a word for those that didn't do well in life. They were called unfortunates. We then turned it into the word losers. So these losers, that are men that are boys essentially, that are losers with women, that are not being sexually selected by women, and they can't get what they want and they can't get an intimate relationship, they're devastated. So then they think, right, well, if I'm going to hell, I'm going to bring everyone down with me because it's not fair. And it's a very immature and very evil and very destructive path to go down.
You can't just brush it off as, oh, well, you know, no one likes me, but really I'm okay. It's like, no, wrong. If everyone rejects you, there's probably something wrong, and it's probably deep and difficult, and it's going to be horrible to fix. And so this isn't a trivial problem. It's not a trivial problem.
But the trouble is then, like, the young lads will go onto something like the internet, and there's loads of people wanting to sell them stuff that are cheap, quick solutions to fix their lack of self-respect and lack of courage. And so men go around thinking that, well, if I make more money, then she'll like me. If I have more muscles, then she'll like me. If I do what she says, then she'll like me. And the trouble is that when you know your own self-worth and you're a man of value, you don't worry about supplicating to other people, because you don't try and qualify yourself to other people. You get them to qualify themselves to you. So it really is about the self-respect. And so men have got to learn to have more self-respect and be more courageous so that they're more valuable to themselves, and then as a downstream effect they'll be more valuable and attractive, and the opposite sex will desire them more.
Problem at all. We diverged from the common ancestor between us and chimpanzees about 6 million years ago. Here's why, at least in part. Chimpanzee females are non-discriminate maters. They'll mate with any male.
I know a few like that.
When they go into heat, which human females don't, then any male is allowed access. Now the dominant males chase the subordinate males away, and so the dominant males are...
Yeah, so that's how the dominant males get the women, is by chasing the non-dominant males away. And so, but that's a very violent act, because there's a lot of fighting and dominance displays involved. And there's a lot of injuries as a result. So the chimps arrange themselves into a hierarchy, and the top chimp gets all the females, and that's how it works by nature. But of course, in our modern day society where everything's got to be equal and there's someone for everyone, that doesn't work, even though we're primates. So we just evolved from that. We're just the cousins. Our closest relatives are chimps and bonobos.
Males are more likely to leave offspring, but it's not because of the female choice. It's not the case with human beings. Human females engage in hypergamy, and this is also true cross-culturally.
And I actually think everyone goes on about how bad hypergamy is, but it's a lot better than the alternative. Because what's happening is, instead of men viciously, brutally competing, where people are going to end up injured and die, what happens is we have more of a civil society, and we have other ways of measuring male success. And so that's based on female sexual selection. It's based on the personal choice of the female. And so she's going to go with who she believes is the most dominant male, so that we don't have to have these fights in order to find out who's the most dominant, because we're basing it on female sexual selection.
Women mate across and up dominance hierarchies. Men mate across and down. The socioeconomic status...
Because if you're at the top chimp at the top of the hierarchy, there's no female above you in terms of survival value. You're above everyone else. So when you're at the... It's lonely at the top.
A woman is almost determines almost zero of her attractiveness towards a man. Whereas the socioeconomic status of a man is a major determinant of his attractiveness.
Yeah, I don't think the feminists get this. It's sort of like the more feminists become more like men and try and do things that attract them to men, and they try and take on those traits. Oh, they like a man with a high-paying job. Well, I'll get a high-paying job and I could be more like a man. Yeah, but it's not attractive to a man, because they're masculine traits, and unless he's gay, he's not going to be attracted to those things. Just because as a woman you're attracted to those things, it doesn't mean to say that the man is attracted to those things in the woman. But in this whole idea of where everything should be equal and everything's the same and there are no differences and there are no hierarchies because they're all flattened out, it's a load of rubbish. One thing has to be better than something else. That's what a hierarchy is. You say yes to one thing and no to something else. The moment that you want equality, you've just eradicated personal freedom and choice.
The status of a man is a major determinant of his attractiveness towards a woman.
That's why sort of like when a man gets with a woman, they ask, what does she look like? Because they're gauging beauty as a way of reproductive resources for the man. And when a woman gets with a man, they say, oh, what does he do? It's because they're gauging the resources that the man can generate based on his economical use.
His attractiveness towards a woman. And it isn't his wealth either, because that's been tested. It's his capacity to generate and be productive and to share, because that beats the hell out of wealth. Wealth can disappear, right? But the capacity to be productive and share, that's a much more important.
Yeah, and again, this all seems very sort of like, when you listen to this stuff, it can be like, well, why does it have to be this way? Why is nature like this? And the reason is for children. You want to have children that have the best chance of survival. That's what both men and women do want. And they're attracted to the opposite sex based on those unconscious criteria of what is going to create the best offspring. So women look for the best sperm and men look for the best place to put that sperm.
Important element, and why not be chosen on the basis of that, especially because women have to have infants, and infants make the woman dependent, and the woman is just looking logically, rationally, and from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah, so when you've got a pregnant woman, how the hell is she going to be equal to an alpha male that's at the top of the dominance hierarchy for survival resources? She's not. So again, all this bullshit about the feminism saying, oh, a pregnant woman is equal to a 6'4", built like a brick shit house man, it's rubbish. She can do the same things he can do. It's complete rubbish. In the same way that a man can't have a baby. You know, because that's her value. Because one is reproduction value and the other one is survival value. And you need to survive before you can reproduce. That's why it needs to be paramount, because you can't reproduce unless you've survived. It's survival and reproduction. So that's why it's more important. That's why everything rests on the man.
And from an evolutionary perspective, for someone who's useful enough to lend a hand. So women make intense demands on men, and it's no wonder. But the thing is that because women engaged in hypergamy, at least in part, we diverged quite rapidly from chimpanzees, because the selection pressure that women placed on men developed the entire species. Now, there's two things that happened as far as I could tell. The men
So there's the idea of natural selection, but there's also the idea of like sexual selection, and that's primarily what's kind of happening.
The men competed for competence, let's say.
Yeah, here's a good example. So, like I said earlier, there are chimps and the bonobos, and there's a river that separates them. And the chimps run based on a male-dominated society, a patriarchy, and the bonobos run on a matriarchal, which is a female-dominated society. So when is the switch over? When does a society go from being male dominated to female dominated? And the answer is in food, because you need food to be able to survive and reproduce. You need the calories from food. So in order to create big strong males that will defend the tribe, and in order to create offspring and all the calories that's going to require, what you need is an abundance of available food resources, but you're competing with other animals on the land. So what happens is that the alpha men are able to get the most amount of food and bring back to the community. That's why he's rewarded with sex. So when you throw apples and stuff at bonobos, they start having sex because they've got enough calories now to reproduce and to create other offspring. So because there's a lack of food on the land, and there's many more animals competing for that food, you need alpha male chimps in order for the tribe to survive. But when you cross the river and you go over to the bonobos, there's less animals competing on that side, and there's more an abundance of food. So now alpha males are no longer necessary, and the females take over. So the chimps are more like gangsters, and the bonobos are more like hippies. And now this is shown in the way in which both express aggression. So when aggression is on the male side, there's big fights and they erupt. Whereas when there's aggression on the female side, they tend to have sex as a way of resolving conflict. That's why bonobos are famous for fucking so much, because they have an abundance of food. So the way to gauge it a bit is when you look at a society, if there's an abundance of food, that society is run by women. If there's not an abundance of food, that society is dominated by men. That's a very simplistic, basic way of looking at it. So all the Western world, for example, there's an abundance of food, which is why it's run by women. And that's just one of the indicators that it's run by women.
So the male hierarchy is a mechanism that pushes the best men to the top, virtually by definition, and then that's the effect of that is multiplied by the fact that women who are hypergamous peel from the top, and so that the males who are the most competent are much more likely to leave offspring, and that seemed to be what drove our cortical expansion, for example, which happened very, very rapidly over the course of evolutionary time. So,
yep, that pretty much sums up that area. That's a lot I've said and a lot to digest, but there's a very complicated biological system going on, and women don't know this. All they do is they know that, oh, I fancy that guy over there. And the same is true for men. It's like there's all this stuff going on underneath the surface, and he just looks over and he's like, oh, she's fit, I'd fuck her. But there's loads of unconscious biological processes and psychological processes going on in order to survive and reproduce, because at the end of the day, we're primates and we need to survive and reproduce in order to continue consciousness throughout time. Knowing all this, it's then very difficult to go back and listen to men going, oh, women are just after men for money. It's a lot more complicated than that. Hello, my name is Doug, and I've created a video tutorial called What to Message a Girl for Online Dating Success. The reason why I've created this product is to help those men out there who are dating online but are not getting the replies or getting the dates that they desire. My product will teach you what to message a girl, what not to message a girl, when to message a girl, how to respond when you're not sure what to write, what to do if she doesn't reply, how to get her phone number, and how to communicate to get online dating success. If you're getting matches and no success, this product is for you. It's what you need to do today to start getting success with your matches. I'll also be talking about other issues such as how to spot red flags, identify time wasters, to stay out the friend zone, how to deal with ghosting, simmering, and icing. Not only will I be giving you exactly what you need, copy and paste, I'll also be explaining to you the reason why I'm writing what I'm writing, so you can understand the psychology and know what behaviours to look out for and which ones to avoid. This product is packed with value. I've tried to cram as much as I can into a short amount of time as possible while being the most informative. If you're a man and you're confused and frustrated with what to text with online dating, this product is the solution for you to get more dates in less time. Click the link in the description box below to buy the product and change your dating life forever.